What's going on, guys? Junior's Fishing Company. Happy fall. I'm thinking winter. We are transitioning from jigs, big musky stuff, bucktail, and we're going downsizing. So this is about 1 3/4 inches. This is just a little streamer, micro streamer, minnow, whatever you want to call it, pattern I've been kind of messing around with for the last week or so. And so this tail is actually, I took a bunch of these flat wings. I have a bunch of flat wings. I mean, you can use really any webby, long feather that you want, I think. And so what I've just been doing is I'll just trim off a little bit and I'll cut it. This is white, just so you can see it better. And I'll just cut it like this, and then I'll really carefully with a razor blade trim up until I get to about the thickness that I want for that little tail. On this one, I just put one feather here. You could double up or do whatever you want. This is a Montana Fly Company 3X long, size 8. This is a 7322 in size 8. I really like these. They're really long, so I could easily add a 1/2 inch to this bait and I wouldn't be too worried about that hook getting missed. So I really like these Montana Fly Company hooks. This is a 1/4 inch tungsten bead from Spawn Fly Fish. These things are rocks, but I want these jigs, especially these are going to be targeted more towards walleye. And if I'm dropping this down 15 feet, I don't want it to sink too slow, and I want to be able to jig this really fast. And when I jig it pretty aggressively, I want it to go up and down. But anyway, I've got 5mm living eyes on here in earth. The underbody of this, you can just see some of that copper kind of coming off the tail. This is Hares ice dub in bloody black. I really like this Hares ice dub. It's a lot thicker because it's got some of that natural, probably rabbit in it. And then Brusier Blend Junior, not the normal, because I've found that the normal is just a little bit long. And then just a little bit of resin at the eyes. But without further ado, it's tied up. All right, so I've got my thread on. This is 70 denier, just UTC black. I've got it right at about my hook or my barb, and I want this bait to be about 2 inches. It's funny when you're making a bait this small, 1/8 of an inch kind of makes a big difference. Not necessarily to the fish, but it's crazy how much you downsize in the winter. So I've got my pre-cut hackle tail. Again, this is just from a flat wing saddle. I just chose the really webby feathers. And so what I want to do, I've kind of learned after doing a few of these, if I just put it on and start wrapping, that feather tends to bend or goes up and down. So I found kind of the best way to do it is really just to figure out how long I want this tail to be. And I might go just a little bit longer. I want this tail to be much longer than what my dubbing head is going to be. So I'm just going to kind of place it on there, and I'm just going to put a single wrap just to hold that feather. And that actually kind of worked out well. Just you get kind of lucky sometimes. If I was going to put 2 feathers on here, I would want the concave parts to touch. It's kind of like putting a biot on. There's 2 ways to kind of put them on, if you want them to splay out or if you want them to touch. I'm just doing 1 feather on these just because I think 2 would make the tail just too bulky. So I've got 1 wrap on here. Maybe I'll do just another 1 or 2. I just want to get this kind of seated, and you can see it's starting to bend a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that tail right where I want it. You just have to be kind of delicate, and I just don't want this to twist too much. And I'm going to take some bone dry, and I'm just going to put a little bit on there. Just a little bit, just to kind of keep it in place where I want that feather. And then I can kind of wrap over that bone dry. It's not like you're wrapping over anything super hard. I'll just grab my light and I'll just kind of harden that up. And then I can make some wraps on here and the feather isn't going to move too much out of place. It's still going to want to move a little, but I can come up here and just put these wraps in over the stem of that feather, and it's not moving. It's really thin. It's kind of hard to see, but the first few I did, I just kept getting frustrated with the tail. So I'm going to kind of hold this because I want to come back for my, see, it's starting to bend. So I'll come back right about back at where my barb is, and these stems, you can kind of bend them a little bit so you can kind of get them where you want. I don't want to go too far down. I can always kind of come lightly down with my dubbing too, but I've just got my hare's ear ice dub. This is a really cool kind of textured material. It's like a natural synthetic, but it's super flashy, and it's just going to build a really good body because it's not all synthetic. So you kind of get that bulk from that rabbit too, I think. Just the couple that I've made, but I'm just going to kind of go slowly at this. I'm not going to just put, 5 inches of dubbing. I just want to make sure I get kind of down there, and I'll just build my way up pretty far up there. I'll just keep wrapping, and you can try and build a nice taper in this, but it really doesn't matter because I'm going to comb it out anyway. And so you're not building the bait's taper with this. You're going to build it with the head, with all that, bruiser blend or sennios, whatever you choose to use. That's what's going to build that bait up. And I don't want this to be too thick because I'm using bruiser blend on this one. It bulks up pretty quick, and so you just kind of got to be careful. I'm just going to put a tiny bit more right by this head, right by my bead. Then I can get my bruiser blend ready. Just build up a little bit right there. Then I can kind of just fold all this back and build up some thread. This 70 denier, you got to make a lot of wraps. So I'm going to comb this out, and you can kind of see when this is wet, it's going to go to about my tail. So all my hare's ice is down, and I'm just going to grab my bruiser blend. So they have bruiser blend junior and just standard bruiser blend. And I'm using junior on this one because I made one with, and I'll show you at the end, I made one with the normal, and it was just too long. I had quite a few fibers. A good chunk of that synthetic was coming down to this tail, and I want this tail fully exposed. So I found if it's going to be too short or too long, I want to go too short. So I've just kind of stacked this up, and I'm going to just do normal like you always do, kind of 50-50, a loose wrap right there. And you can always add more of this. Don't add too much right away. If I get this down and I get it wet and it doesn't look how I want it, I can always add more. But it's really annoying when you make a bait that's too bulky and you have to figure out how to go back and thin it out. So I'll get this second one down, again about 50-50, get a loose wrap on there right by my bead, a couple wraps just to get it down, and I can make sure it's spread out. And I'll just start with this one. I'm just going to fold it back, and I want to try and wrap on to my bruiser blend. If I cord my thread a little bit, I want to try and wrap on my bruiser blend. because that's where I'm going to put my eyes. So I'll fold this one back. And I'm going to come right on top and get a couple. This is 70 denier, so it always takes me a few jigs or nymphs or whatever to get used to that 70 denier feeling instead of, you know, some of the 280s where you can just ream down on it. But 70 you'll snap. So you can kind of see, once I get some of those loose fibers out, some of that, even this junior, is gonna come down right to that tail. So that's just my intention with this. And I could have made this a much longer bait. I could have made this 2.5, close to 3 inches, and just got a larger jig hook, but I'll get this down, build up some thread a little bit, and then I'll just whip finish this off and we'll do our eyes. So I've got this combed out. Before I start putting these eyes on, I've had a couple of those little bruiser blend fibers kind of get caught in the eye of my hook. So I'm just gonna take a little lighter and I'm just gonna touch them just to kind of get rid of all that stuff, because when you put down glue and all this stuff, it just sticks everywhere and you just got to be careful. So I'm just going to take some of my super glue and I'm using 5mm eyes on this. It's crazy the difference between a 3mm and a 5, but some of the jigs I've been tying, it's nice to have those options. I've got 3, 4, and 5, but on this one I just like a bigger eye, and so this is Earth in living eyes. So what I'm going to do, these aren't too small, so they're a little bit easier to work with. I'm just going to push it right on that super glue, and on a bait like this, I'm not going to have that eye sit on the bead. I've got a couple things I'm messing around with, and this is just a side note. I've got these little lead heads that you can just, you can order these from Amazon or anywhere. I think these were Cabela's. But this is lead, and I took a pliers, and you can push these pliers or this lead flat where you can put your eyes on that way. But this tungsten, I don't know how strong you are, but this tungsten ain't gonna do that. So you kind of have to put it behind, because it looks a little goofy when you put it, you know, this flat eye, the one side's flat, on that kind of rounded jig head. So again, it's not perfect, but I'm just going to push that right on there. I want it just about halfway. Doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm going to kind of let this glue dry, and then I'm going to get my resin. This is going to be just Solarez medium. So I'm going to grab my medium, and I'm not going to put a ton down. Right on the edge of where my thread and my dubbing is where I want some of this resin to go. And I'll just start with I guess this would be the bottom. I'll just start with the bottom, I'll put a little bit, then I'm just going to start running it over the eye. Come back to the top. So I'll get right there, and then I'll just keep going. And if you get bubbles in your resin, you can just tap a lighter to it and it'll kind of pop those bubbles, but I don't really see many. This is where you kind of get them though, when you start running. I got this super cool tool. I can't remember what it's called, but it's made by Stompfo, and I got this at Charlie's Fly Box, and it's got this like super micro tip, almost like a bodkin, I guess you'd call it a bodkin, and then it's got these razor blades on the other end. This is actually what I used to make this tail. This tool, it was only like 15 bucks, and it came with extra razor blades too. It's just an awesome tool. When I saw it, I had to have it. So I'm just gonna push a little bit of that resin on to my bruiser blend. Just a little bit, just to kind of hold that up. I'm just going to take my light and I'm just going to start, and I'm just going to rotate it pretty slowly. But what you want to focus on is the top and the bottom. That's where a lot of that resin is. And it says, you know, on Solarez or whatever, I think like 10 seconds, kind of on, off, on, off. So I'm going to make sure that that's good to go. So this is all black. I mean, there's a million different combinations you could do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this wet and we'll see how she looks. All right, there it is. This came out to be pretty close to 1 3/4 of an inch, a little bit shorter than what I wanted. But I'm going to pump a few of these out, so I'll just make sure that the next couple are a little bit longer. But all black, minnow pattern. You can call this a micro streamer, you can call it a micro minnow, micro jig, whatever. I mean, it's not even very small. I wouldn't say micro, but in jig terms, I've got some size 18s that I'm trying to figure out what to tie on. I really like how this tail kind of turned out. These tails are really cool, but I don't know if you're fishing them a ton in the water, if these tails are going to stick together, but well, there's only one way to find out. So like and subscribe. Junior's Fishing Company. It's early fall. We're thinking winter. Drilling holes in the ice. I'm excited. We'll see you on the next one.